Hey guys, welcome back to a new video. In this video I will show you how you can send push notifications using your own backend, your own Ktor backend. So what we essentially will do is we will have a very simple app with two text fields here. We can choose a title and a description for our notification. Let's do that. Hello YouTube, for example. And the description, this is a sample notification. And if we then click send, we can see that on both devices here, we essentially received our notification. And that is pretty cool. So you can, of course, use this for whatever you like, for your chat app, for your social media app, for, I don't know, for whatever you like. I will show you how you can just send a notification to all registered devices here. If you want to send a notification just to one device, that is of course also possible, but that is nothing I will show you here. But I will quickly explain how you could do that if you would like to do that. For this mechanism, we will use something called OneSignal. That is a push notification provider, so we can use that to send these push notifications. These work even if the app is closed, even if the device sleeps. So yeah, that's just how push notifications work. And OneSignal is just a provider I really like because they offer you a lot of customization, and in my experience, sending these push notifications is also really reliable. There are some prerequisites here for this video, so some things you should make sure before you jump into this, because this is a little bit more complex topic, because it involves quite a lot of different things like Ktor, OneSignal, Jetpack Compose, all of that. So I would like you to actually get this initial project here from my GitHub. All this really contains is the UI. It's just a column with two text fields, our title and our description, because I don't think this needs to be in the video. I don't think I need to show you how to create two text fields. So we will just use this initial project to implement our OneSignal API, or our OneSignal setup actually. And I also included the dependencies we need for this video in this project. So here in our build.gradle project file, on the one hand we have this OneSignal Gradle plugin which you need. And we have Kotlin serialization as a plugin for Gradle. Because as I said, we will use a Ktor backend to send these notifications. In theory, you could just implement all of that stuff in Android only. Because what we actually need to do is we need to make an HTTP request to OneSignal to send our push notification. However, if we do that from Android, that means we need to include our API key, Android side, client side, and that is something you should definitely never do for a production app, because anybody who reverse engineers your app would then be able to access your API key and simply send notifications in your name using your quota and deciding the text of the notification. That is nothing you want. So we instead will make a request to our own Ktor backend, and from there we make the HTTP request to the OneSignal servers, because server side on our own server, our API key is pretty safe. Then the next step, what you need to make sure is you need to make sure that you create an account here on onesignal.com. You can just click on sign up here and then just create your account here. I am already signed up, and that is how your dashboard will look like. And here we will then create an application which will be linked to our app in the end. So in case you know Firebase, this is very, very similar. If you create a project in Firebase, the same way you just create an app here in your OneSignal dashboard. You can see I have two apps here already. This was the one I prepared here for this video, but I will show you how to create a new one, because that is what you need to know. Then one more thing you need is actually a Firebase account. So we will need access to your Firebase Console. That is what I'm logged in here. I assume if you're an Android developer, then most of you will probably have an account here on Firebase. If not, just create one, and then this will be your dashboard without these projects here. But you can just create a new project here and then pick that for your OneSignal. Because in the end, what OneSignal uses behind the scenes is just FCM, Firebase Cloud Messaging. All of these push notification providers use that behind the scenes. So we actually need that key from Firebase in our OneSignal dashboard. So OneSignal can actually use FCM under the hood to send our notifications. So far so good. Let's actually go through this step by step. and set up our OneSignal application here. So here in our dashboard, I don't know if this looks exactly the same way as here, but somewhere in your dashboard there will be a link to create a new app here. Probably if you create your account, then you will automatically get to that screen. But if you click on that, then it will look like this. Here you need to choose a name for your app or website. I will choose, I don't know, Ktor push notification tutorial or so. Whatever, if you have an app name, then put it in here. Then we need to decide which platform we actually use with this app. Of course, that is Android. You can see we used FCM for that, Firebase Cloud Messaging. And then we can click Next. Now you see that is where we actually need to provide our server key from Firebase and the sender ID. To do that, we need to go to our Firebase Console. You need to select one of your projects you want to link to this OneSignal dashboard. I will choose Firebase Tutorials here. And then you want to go to these preferences here, click Project Settings. You then click on Cloud Messaging, and here is your server key. So you want to copy this token here, don't give this anybody else. We want to paste this in here. And for the sender ID, we need to go back to Firebase and copy this sender ID here and paste it in here. Then we can click Save and Continue. No, I don't want to update my password. Now we need to pick the Target Sdk. So on which platform do we want to use? You want OneSignal, that is of course native Android. And we click Save and Continue. There we go. Now it tells us install the SDK. This is now the app ID that you need to provide in Android. This is not secret here. It just helps OneSignal to determine which app to actually send the notifications to. So let's copy that. And we can jump into IntelliJ actually first, because in IntelliJ we will build our Ktor backend. If you have absolutely no idea how Ktor works and how you can set up a new project there, then you want to check out this video here first, because I won't explain everything from absolute scratch here. I will assume that you actually know the very, very basics of Ktor. I have a video, as I said, that explains everything from scratch. If you're a little bit more advanced, then you probably don't need that basics video. Then you can just keep watching here, or in case you of course saw the video, then you will also be good to go. You will also get the initial Ktor project down here from my GitHub repository, so just download that or simply clone it into IntelliJ. So I will do that here. That is the initial project in Ktor. This also essentially just contains the dependencies that we need here, Kotlin serialization, and here Ktor client and Ktor serialization JSON. So of course we need some kind of HTTP client here server side, because we need to make the HTTP request to the OneSignal servers to tell OneSignal, hey, we want to really send our push notification. So if you either created a new Ktor project and included these dependencies, or you just got my Ktor project, the initial one, you can jump into your application class. And in here, what we need to do is we first actually want to initialize our HTTP client that we need to make the network requests. As I said, we will use the Ktor client for that, which makes this stuff really simple. So we could of course in a real project use dependency injection here for that. I will just use normal constructor injection, or rather parameter injection. So we create our client here, which is an HTTP client. We use the CIO engine for that. That is just basically what drives the client. Not so important here. Any engine here will work, any of the mentioned engines in the docs. And here in this Lambda block, we can configure our HTTP client. All we really want to do is we want to set a serializer, and it seems like I'm missing a dependency. No, I'm not. I'm actually dumb. We need to install the JSON feature first, and then we can set a serializer and set it to our Kotlin X serializer. So just to use the Kotlin serialization plugin, which will, when we make a post request, automatically take the data class and convert it to JSON to, actually make the post request. And also when we actually get data from an API in form of a JSON string, it will take that JSON string and put it into a Kotlin data class. Okay, what is next? As I said, to make requests to OneSignal, we need to provide an API key, which we get from our OneSignal dashboard. And here it's important that this API key is really secret. Don't give this anyone. As I said, anyone who has this can send push notifications in your name, and you definitely don't want this. So you want to go to your browser. In your OneSignal dashboard, I'm clicking done here. And yes, then it will look like this. Here under settings, you want to go to keys and IDs. And here you will find your app ID on the one hand. That is public, that's fine if other people see that. But here is this REST API key, which is secret, which you can also already guess here. So we want to copy that, and we want to go back to IntelliJ. We want to put this into our config file server side, so we don't need to put this key somewhere in our code, because imagine you're working with other people on your project, then you don't want to have this key in your version control system, in your GitHub repository. So you instead put this in a config file, which you can easily just exclude from Git. To find this config file, we can go to Resources, Application Config, and here under Ktor we can actually create a new block of config, which I'll call OneSignal. And in here we will have an API key property where we can paste our key. When that is done, we actually want to create an API service, so a service for our Ktor client that sends our request. So if you know retrofit and Android, that's basically what we do. We now define an interface with the functions we need to access the OneSignal API. So in PL coding, in my root package, we will create a new package called data.remote, and in that I will also create a DTO package that stands for data transfer object, and will contain the data classes that we will serialize to JSON to attach that to our request. I will now paste two classes here, our DTO classes, into this package, which you can either get from the GitHub repository or just by writing this off here. On the one hand, this notification class, need to fix the import here. You can see this contains some properties that will be the class that will be serialized to JSON and attached to our request, and that will describe how our notification looks like. This includes the bare minimum you actually need to attach to a request. You can actually go to, I think here, to the documentation.onesignal.com/reference/create notification. You find that down below the link. Here you have the REST API documentation of OneSignal, and here you can see we want to create a notification that is a post request, and here you find tons of parameters you can actually attach to that request to specify how your notification looks like, who should receive that. You can define some segments, you can define whatever, you can send these to people with a specific phone number. You can specify images for the notification and stuff like that. There is a lot to experiment with. I will show you the bare minimums here because that already takes quite a bit of time. So that is the minimum body we actually need for that. So you see, first of all, we have an included segments list here, list of strings. With that, as I said, we can include segments we want to send this notification to. So you could define, hey, I have a segment with males, I have a segment with females, and then you can better distinguish, okay, I now want to send the notification for the Marvel action hero advertisement to all males that are below 18 years old or so, and then you can send some beauty product advertisements to all females and stuff like that. So that is why you have these segments. If, however, you want to send a notification to just one person or to a limited group of persons, for example a group chat, or as I said, just to one person, then you can use this instead here, which is commented out here. Include external user IDs. So with OneSignal you can actually, when you have some kind of user system on your server, so if users can create accounts and you save these in a database, then you can save these OneSignal user IDs in addition to that for each user in the database, and then you can provide a list of user IDs that you just pass to the request, and the notification will only be sent to these specific users. And because that requires a little bit too much setup here for this video with all that database stuff, and so I don't want to show you that, but I want to show you that with these segments. And for that, we can basically just pass a list with the all segment. So we will send a notification to all users, or rather to all apps that are registered for OneSignal. Then we have the contents and the headings, which is, I think, self-explanatory. So the title of the notification and the content, so the description. And we need to provide our app ID, so which app we actually want to send the notification to. But that is pretty much it. If we take a look in this notification message here, then here you can actually also translate your notification into different languages, and OneSignal will then automatically show the right language to the right users. Right now we only care about English notifications, but if you would, for example, translate your message to German, then you could have the German country code, which is DE, also in here, and then just provide a German translation for that. But for simplicity, I will leave that away. So now we will create the API service in our remote package, which I will call OneSignal service, make that an interface, and here we define the functions we need to access our OneSignal API. In our very simple example, that's just a function to send a notification. But as I said, in a real app, you could have a variety of functions. These are basically the different requests you could make to the OneSignal API. So feel free to play around with that. In here, we will have a suspend function, send notification, that will take a notification of our DTO class here. And for simplicity, I will just return a boolean whether that request was successful or not. Then in here, I will have a companion object for some constants. On the one hand, we want to have a const val for our OneSignal app ID, which is the non-secret one. So if we take a look here under app settings, we can copy this OneSignal app ID and paste it in here. And then we will have a variable for the URL where we actually want to send the request to push a notification. So that will be called notifications. And I will copy over the URL from here, which is this. You can also find that in the API docs, so just use the same URL here and you're good to go. The next step is to actually write an implementation of that service, so we can actually use something to send the notification. Right-click DTO, new Kotlin class of file called OneSignal service implementation. That will take an instance to our HTTP client we created in our application file. Make sure to import the one from IO Ktor client. And this will implement our OneSignal service interface. We can press Ctrl-I to implement the function here, send notification. And here we just need to make our actual network request. So we can return a try and catch block to catch potential errors. So in case of an exception, we just want to print that, and we want to return false because then the request was not successful. Here in the try block, we want to use our client to make a post request. This will actually also respond with something that I don't care about here. So theoretically, you can also parse the response here with Ktor to get specific errors from OneSignal side. But I will just assign a string here, so we just get the JSON string as a response, and we don't do anything here with it. Then in here we can configure our request. First of all, we want to set the URL where we want to send the HTTP request to, which will be OneSignal service dot notifications, the constant we actually included. We don't need these parentheses. Then we want to make sure that we set the content type to content type application.json, just to make sure, hey, we are sending JSON data. We want to attach a header for the authentication, so we actually need to attach our API key to authorize ourselves for OneSignal. Otherwise, that wouldn't work. The header will be the authorization header. And for the value, that is basic authentication. So we need to prepend basic followed by our API key. So we say API key here, which we can also pass as a parameter. private val API key of type string. So that makes sure that we actually authorize ourselves so we can make our request. And finally, we want to say the body is our notification, and that will automatically be parsed to JSON because we have the Kotlin serialization plugin installed. And then we can return true here, because if this fails, then it will throw an exception, so it will never reach that point, and we will return false here instead. And now the very last thing we need to do here is to go into our routing file, in which we can define the route to which we want to send the notification from our Android app to our Ktor server. And in here, we will then make the request from Ktor to OneSignal. So I will call this send notification, the route. And yeah, I will leave it a GET request. We can debate about that. Probably a POST request would make more sense, but a GET request is the more simple version here, because then we can just use title and description as query parameter, and we don't need all that serialization stuff client-side on Android. But in a production app, I will probably make that a POST request, because this request here is also a POST request. So we first of all want to extract the title and description parameter from the request. So val title is call.parameters, and we will call that title. If that is null for whatever reason, we just assign test here. So if the client didn't attach that, you could also just respond with a bad request or so. I will just send a test notification instead if we don't provide that. Call parameters. For the description, we pass description. And again, make sure it's definitely non-null. And then we actually need to send the notification, for which we need our service. So let's pass that here as a parameter. Service is OneSignal service. And then we can get the result. So if that was successful, from service, send notification. And here we can now construct that with our notification class. The included segments will be a list of all, as I said. So here we can include different segments we want to send that to. For example, as I said, we could say male, female. Of course, you would need to set these up OneSignal side, these segments. We don't have that here, so I will just send it to all people. Then I will assign headings, which is a notification message. And here for the English text, I would say that is our title. The contents is a notification message. Here we pass our description. And the app ID is OneSignal service.OneSignal app ID. Then down here we can just check if that was successful or not. If it was, we want to respond just with OK. And if it was not successful, we respond with internal server error. Of course, you could do a lot more validation here and respond with more helpful errors, but that would also be a little bit too much for this video. So the last thing that's missing server side is actually creating this OneSignal service and passing it to this configure routing block. So that will be here. We want to have our service as OneSignal service implementation, which will take our client and the API key, which is in our config file, if you remember, that is in here. So we need to get this config file and specifically the constant in there, our API key. Let's pass the service here, and then get the API key here using environment config property, and here we need to define the property name, which is our REST key. Did I call it like that? No, it's API key. API key, and then we call it getString. So we get that as a string, and then we pass it here. And that way you can then add your application config file into your gitignore file to actually make sure it's not pushed to GitHub. So I already pushed that to GitHub, I think, but doesn't matter. I will generate a new key anyways. So if you would like to do that, you open your gitignore file, you say you want to exclude src main resources application config. And everybody who would then work with you would need his own application config file on his local machine. So if we now want to launch our server, we need to click on this play symbol next to main, run application KT, and let's hope nothing crashes. On my machine here, initially there will be a crash because the port the server is running on is already chosen, and seems like the property API key is not found. That is interesting. Let's take a look here. It is called the same way. Oh, I realize it's actually OneSignal.api key. So we need to say OneSignal.api key. Relaunch this and then this should work. So yes, but now for me it will crash, you will see. Yep, because the address is already in use. So if it doesn't crash for you, then it's all good. You can leave everything as it is. If it crashes, you need to change your port in application config. It just means there's already an application running on this port 8080. So you can choose any other port, doesn't really matter here. Relaunch this, and if this is not taken on your machine, then everything will work fine and your server is actually running. So let's actually get to the Android part. For that we want to copy our OneSignal app ID, because we will also need that Android side. So just copy that, open Android Studio, and the first thing we want to do is want to initialize OneSignal in our application class. We don't have an application class, so let's create it. I will call it push, not push application. Select class, yes, add that to Git. That will inherit from application, and here we can override on create. So let's put in our app ID here in a companion object. Private const val OneSignal app ID will be what we copied from our server. Then in onCreate we actually want to say OneSignal init with context, where we pass our application context, and then we can say OneSignal set app ID, and we pass our OneSignal app ID. That will just associate this specific app with the app ID on OneSignal, so OneSignal knows this is the app to send the notification to. Then we want to go to our manifest to actually add that application class, say name, and specify push application. We also want to specify internet permission, because we of course make network requests. And we want to say uses clear text traffic and set it to true, because we don't have any HTTPS setup yet on our server. For that you would need a certificate and deploy that. So we actually need to explicitly declare this as HTTP only, otherwise it wouldn't work. And in a production app, please use a certificate and encrypt your traffic. However, that's not the topic here. In a main activity, or actually no, in our root package, we want to now create another of these services with Ktor client. This one will be a little bit more simple here. So we want to have a remote package, data.remote, in which we declare such a service for our Ktor API. I'll call it API service. Yes, don't ask again, please. In which we will just have one function, and that will now talk to Ktor, and the service we define on Ktor will talk to OneSignal, if that makes sense. Suspend function, send notification. We provide a title and a description. This won't return anything. We will just catch potential exceptions. And in here we will have a companion object with a corresponding route. Const val send notification. And that will be now the URL linking to our server. So HTTP, not HTTPS. /-10.022 if you use an emulator. If you don't use an emulator, this won't work. Then you also don't want to choose localhost, because that will refer to the local host of your phone or of your emulator, and not to the local host of your PC. If you plan to use that on your phone that is connected via Wi-Fi to your local network, you can go to CMD, enter ipconfig and you instead want to use, here you want to find the Ethernet adapter or your Wi-Fi adapter, and choose this IPv4 address. This one, the local one, and pass it here instead. I will now do that. That will work for everything. So we actually want to then append our port, which you have chosen. If you didn't change it, it will be 8080 for you. I changed it though, and it will be /send notification. So far for our interface, we can then create the implementation of that in our remote package. API service implementation, inherit from API service, and that will actually also need a private client here of type HTTP client to actually make the request with. Control I, enter, and here we can just have a try and catch block to make our request. Catch potential exceptions. Here I will just print the stack trace, I won't handle any errors. And here in the try block we will use the client to make a GET request. This one here, it will also just return a string, we don't care about the response. The URL here will be API service, send notification, and then we need to define two query parameters for the title and the description that we attach to the GET request. So parameter, title is the key, and the value will be our title parameter, and the same for the description and the description. Cool. So now that we have this service implementation, we can go to main activity. And here I will create on the one hand our client and then our service. Of course, in a real project, please don't do that in the UI layer in your activity. If you want to use a proper architecture, you would use dependency injection, create or provide the service there and the client, and then inject it into a view model that will talk to repository. So you would use the service in a repository and you would inject the repository in the view model. I have plenty of playlists where I do exactly that. So please don't do this in a production app, but I don't want to use a proper architecture for time constraint reasons. Private val client will be an HTTP client. Here, Android side, we need to provide the Android engine, so not the CIO engine. We don't need to configure anything here, so we don't need a serializer on the client side because it's just a GET request, not a POST one. And then we can say we have the service, which is an API service implementation, for which we need our client. And now, in onCreate, or rather in our onClick listener, we can use the client, the service, to make our actual request. So we can say service.send notification, title will be our title state, and the description will be the description state. And you can see we get an error because it's not a coroutine here, so we need to make sure we get a coroutine scope here. Val scope is equal to remembers coroutine scope. And then say scope.launch and simply move that in here. And that should be everything we need here. So I will actually launch this on both of my emulators. There we go. Both of our applications are launched, and we can close one of these. So just make sure you open that once. So OneSignal was initialized and the app was registered. But then we can provide a title, hello, test description, hello, hello, or whatever. Click send, and actually make sure that your Ktor server is running. Is that the case? Yes, it is the case. So make sure this is running, otherwise it won't work. So in Android Studio and our emulators, we can click send. And you can see here is the notification, and here it is as well. So everything is working perfectly fine. Of course, if you have a real app, as I explained probably 10 times this video, you need to think a little bit more about what kind of setup you choose for these notifications. This just should show you how you should set up the OneSignal framework to protect your API key, to send very basic push notifications, but the rest is actually explained quite well in the OneSignal documentations. If you say Ktor is a really cool backend and you want to learn more about that, then you definitely want to check the courses down below, which are my 2 premium courses about Ktor. On the one hand, we have a node app that we will make there in one course, so the nodes will actually be saved remotely on a Ktor backend. In a MongoDB, we will have an authentication mechanism there so that each user has its own nodes. And the other course will focus more on real-time traffic, so using WebSockets on Ktor to make a real-time scribble game. So one player gets to choose a word, the player will then draw something on their phone, and the other players will see in real time what the player is drawing and need to guess what that is. 2 really cool courses you can both use to learn Ktor a lot more in depth, so definitely do check them out. Apart from that, I hope you really liked this video. If so, please give it a like and leave a comment below. And I wish you an excellent day. See you in the next video. Bye bye.